In this episode of the No Excuse to Miss podcast, we take on a little bit different format for this one and answer a couple customer questions, ranging from information regarding our carbon fiber barrels to why are our parts different from our competitors. And the question that we seem to get all the time is what happened to the 17 WSM? This is the No Excuse to Miss podcast. Welcome back to the No Excuse to Miss podcast. I'm your host, Scott Volquartsen, and this week I am with our Director of Marketing, Chad Wittrock. This episode will be a little bit different from our typical guest format. We have had a few questions sent in and had customers ask if we could answer them online or in the podcast, so that's what we're going to do here. And we will try to mix a few of these in between guests. So if you do have a question, feel free to hit us up at podcast@volquartsen.com. That's podcast@volquartsen.com. So we will jump right into it. Chad, how are you doing today?
Good. I think this will be a great episode. We definitely get a variety of questions sent to us via social media or email. So I think it'll be good to get some of those answered and provide some clarity on a few topics.
And a couple of these questions, it's easier to discuss in person versus trying to type up an email reply or a social media reply. It allows us to get a little bit further in depth. So I hope you guys enjoy this.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We'll be able to get into a little more detail, and it should be a little easier to follow than a long, drawn-out email. And sometimes there's just so much information that we can't necessarily put it on our website or anything like that. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump in. I got an email from Chris who asked if we could talk more about our carbon fiber barrels. How do they compare to our stainless steel barrels? And how do they differ from maybe other carbon fiber barrels that are on the market?
So there's a couple different things there. And I guess first I'll break down, we have both our lightweight carbon fiber barrel, and then we also offer an ultralight barrel. And a lot of times we'll get questions, what are the differences between those two? And the main difference is the lightweight barrel is made from a slightly heavier diameter. It is a half-inch barrel blank versus a 10-millimeter barrel blank. So yes, it is heavier than the ultralight, but that also, if somebody was looking for lightweight but not giving up any accuracy whatsoever, I would say go with our lightweight barrel. The ultralight barrel was really designed for rimfire steel shooting.
So for speed,
to go light and go quick. You know, and obviously it's still going to shoot better than a factory barrel, but if you are looking for accuracy, I would go with a little bit heavier lightweight barrel. You know, the lightweight barrel itself is still going to weigh less than 20 ounces.
Wow, yep.
So, I don't want to say it's heavier, but it's not quite as light as what we designed for rimfire steel.
Sure. So yeah, the ultralight barrel is really geared for that competition side of things.
Yes, speed competition.
Would you say, what if it's a youth shooter, or maybe somebody wants to maybe build something or purchase something for a youth shooter getting into, would you still lean towards that ultralight option, or would you say it just kind of depends on the application?
I would say it depends on the application.
Sure.
Because for certain guys, if you are trying to shoot, any sort of precision or for accuracy, the ultralight can almost be too light, and we've had guys talk about they have trouble steadying the barrel.
Sure, that makes sense, yep.
So then back on Chris's question of, how are they constructed? How do they compare to different barrels? One of the major differences, and we've done this since we came out with our lightweight barrels back in the late 90s, is we have a airspace between the barrel and the sleeve itself. And we do that for a couple different reasons. One, each end of our barrel is threaded, which allows us to put tension on the barrel and use the rigidity of the carbon fiber sleeve to help create tension and eliminate any sort of barrel whip from the smaller diameter. It improves barrel harmonics. But by doing that airspace also gives it a space to cool.
Oh, okay, yep.
Because the carbon fiber can be extremely insulating. And I know there's other barrels out there that the barrel is actually pressed into the carbon fiber sleeve.
Okay, so it would not have the air.
Correct.
In that hip.
And in our testing, when we did that, after as few as 25 to 50 rapid fire rounds, that barrel would start to heat up. The point of impact would start to shift. The groups would start to open up. And when we originally designed our lightweight barrel, that was the one thing that we didn't want to sacrifice was accuracy just for the sake of being lightweight.
Sure, you want to make sure function was still priority number one.
Correct. It was important to us to still get the accuracy that we expected out of our barrel blanks, even in that lightweight configuration.
So that really kind of answers that. Like you said, carbon fiber being an insulator, do the carbon fiber barrels, not dissipate heat as well? But they do. Ours do, in fact, because of that air.
Correct. And the other aspect of that, in addition to the airspace, is with our barrel blank being nearly a 1/2 inch in diameter, most of our competitors are using something in the ballpark of a 3/8 diameter. So just that additional material is going to help dissipate heat.
Right. Yep.
So these are a lot of factors that we took into play as we designed this. And once again, it's something we have learned over 20 plus years of manufacturing that barrel. They've come a long ways. We've gone from the original one. A little side story here is the original barrel that we had before we used carbon fiber actually had an aluminum sleeve.
Okay.
Which we still offer, but the difference is back then we would actually put that aluminum sleeve in a freezer.
Really?
And then, we would assemble it when it was in that, for lack of a better term, frozen state. Mm-hmm. And it would expand enough that it would create so much tension on that barrel that we actually had that aluminum would warp.
Wow.
So, everything from how much tension we put on the barrel, we no longer obviously do the freezing part.
That was eliminated.
But, it's been one of those things that we are constantly learning. And we will be coming out with even a slightly revised version of the lightweight barrel in 2022. Once again, it'll be a better platform for guys that are trying to use a lightweight barrel with a suppressor.
Oh, right. Yep.
So we're looking forward to that, but it's constantly evolving from stuff that we learn, feedback from customers, our own individual testing.
Yeah, it's ongoing research constantly.
Yes.
And moving even kind of on from there, we can move into kind of the carbon fiber barrels right into the stainless steel barrels.
That's the other big question we will get is which barrel is going to be more accurate. And if I'm being 100% honest, the stainless steel bull barrel will probably be more consistent and more accurate from group to group. Mm-hmm. But at 50 yards, you are talking a very minimal difference between that and the lightweight barrel. You will see a difference to the ultralight, like we talked about earlier. But between the stainless steel and the lightweight, at 50 yards, you might be talking probably less than a 1/16 of an inch difference.
Oh, wow. So not much at all at 50 yards. And I guess even playing that up, so it really kind of, as you touched on earlier, choosing your barrel is really going to come down to a combination of basically what you have in mind to do with your firearm, and personal preference.
Correct. So for a lot of guys, I will get asked, like if they're buying one of our 22 mags or a 17 HMR, they'll say they want to carry it around in the field all day.
Yep.
But they're worried about losing accuracy. But once they find out it's such a minimal difference, they will sacrifice that 1/16 of an inch or less for basically eliminating a little over a pound in rifle weight.
Yeah. So basically, like we were touching on their application, it was just weighing the pros and cons of what they were going to use it for and making that personal choice.
Yes. And the flip side of that is, so many times we're all looking to go lighter.
Yeah.
But then there are a lot of the guys that are doing like the NRL competitions, or they just like to shoot off a bench or long range, relatively speaking, long range for rimfire. But in doing that, they actually prefer the additional weight of our stainless steel barrel.
Right. You get the rigidity.
Correct. We will have a lot of guys talk about if they try to go to the lightweight and they're more of a conventional bench rest shooter, they have trouble steadying or stabilizing just because they almost feel like they're getting some sort of barrel whip.
Right.
And they also, the other thing that we have heard is because they're so light, if you ever get a windy day or adverse conditions, they prefer, especially like I said, if they're off a bench and weight, carrying it around all day is not an issue, they will prefer that heavier stainless steel bull barrel.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, especially with the growing popularity of like NRL 22 and precision rimfire shooting. I think that's a great point to touch on now, especially for so many years, things went lighter and lighter and lighter.
Yeah, and the one thing that I will always recommend to people is many times we will get caught up in overall weight. But to me, balance comes long before that.
Right.
You know, if you look at back like when the initial 1022 craze started and everybody's putting stainless steel bull barrels on them, they did not really balance very well when you had an aluminum receiver and a 3-pound barrel hanging off there.
Yeah, you're front heavy.
Correct. So like if guys are going to use a stainless steel barrel, I'll typically recommend one of ours or one of our competitors' stainless steel receivers, because that will actually, even though it's going to be heavier than the aluminum receiver version, it will ultimately balance better.
You put some weight in the center of the gun.
Correct. So that's the other thing that I always caution people to look at when they are trying to determine which barrel or which platform they want to go with.
I think that's a great point. And even moving on a little bit, looking at our parts individually, we get a lot of questions. How are our parts different from maybe our competitors' parts, or how are our parts manufactured that make them different?
This is something we get a lot, and one of the major differences is we do not use any cast or mass-produced components. You know, the MIM process has come a long ways over the last 15 to 20 years. But in our minds, it is still not the same as working from billet material.
Sure.
So everything we do, whether we are CNC machining it or wire EDM cutting it, is going to come from billet material. And that does a couple things. One, anytime you start working with a casting or something like that, you always run the risk of having air pockets or structural issues with the material itself.
So does that make them a little more brittle, or how would you describe what would happen there?
It can leave voids in the parts.
Okay.
So sometimes when you get a part, you may see like a what appears to be like a small pinhole or something along those lines.
Okay, sure. Yep.
Where when you work from billet material, you're going to ultimately end up with a better part. It's easier to machine from our end, and everything. The other aspect that we do a lot of stuff as we machine it start to finish in our machines. That's not the case with everything because it'd be impossible, but either between wire EDM cutting or our machining process, we try to eliminate as many secondary ops as possible.
Okay.
Because we have found anytime you can eliminate the human part of it, having to reload a part or put it into an additional fixture, you are going to end up with a better part. And then on the internal parts, by going with the wire EDM process, it is going to be more time consuming. It's more costly to machine, but you simply can't replace those tolerances that we are able to generate from that style of machining. And the other part that it allows us to do is with the wire EDM, we can cut hardened material, it can be done in CNCs, but it's a little more difficult. So by doing that, we're able to we're able to harden the part and then wire EDM cut it, so you don't get that material change that can sometimes happen as you heat treat a part.
Yeah, that makes sense. And for someone that's not familiar, can you explain a little more about the wire EDM process, how it works? So
basically, it is burning the part with an electrical discharge from the brass wire that feeds through it. So in conventional machining, you always have tooling that will wear just through the process of contact, where the brass wire never comes in contact with the part, and it is constantly feeding through, so you're never reusing that wire twice.
Sure.
So you are always dealing with, it'd be like working with a brand new end mill at all times.
Right.
Which is, it's not feasible, but that's basically the way you're able to machine.
So yeah, it basically, and I'm no machinist, but it basically eliminates that tool wear component.
Correct. And there's various diameters of wire that you can do, everything, typically we use like an 8 to 10 thousandths wire. And if you need to get tighter tolerances, you can go to a smaller diameter wire than that. But, so that just gives you an idea of what you're working with.
Right.
So for those that don't really understand like what 8 thousandths is, it basically about 2 to 3 strands of hair.
It's crazy
what
to think
the diameter
about.
of that wire is.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about.
And something else is, as we're on this topic that we do, is like the way we manufacture, even like our laminated wood stocks. a lot of companies that are in the laminated wood business, they turn all the outsides of the stock on a variety of machines, typically duplicators, and then they go back and they machine the inletting.
Yeah, that's second in their process.
Correct. What we have found is we machine our inletting first when the stock is at its most rigid, and then we go back and fixture onto there and turn the outside from there, because obviously the outside dimensions are less critical than the fitting on the inside.
Oh, right. So if you're doing the outside first, you're maybe getting some twisting or something going on. So
correct. And you just get more flex as you're machining.
Yep.
Where this allows us to, and they're all very little things, but they're things that we have learned over the last few decades of machining that end up making when you're trying to get a 22 to shoot half inch at 100 yards, all these little things come into play.
Yeah, definitely.
There's, never like one, you have to do this one thing. It's a combination of a lot of little factors that go into play.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good point, is taking the time to be precise on every tolerance at every aspect of the machining process for every part and component.
And that even comes down to like the way we flute our barrels. There are much faster ways to flute than what we're currently doing. But fluting is one of those things that as soon as you start pushing it, you are going to end up with a less accurate barrel. The barrel itself, the bore, can only take so much stress before you are going to change its performance.
Right, yep.
So there's a lot of little things that we don't really divulge how we do it. Because a common debate is a fluted barrel more or less accurate than a stainless steel bull barrel? And there's a lot of different schools of thought on that. But the one consistent that we've always said is a lot of that depends on how the barrel is fluted.
Yeah.
The process that it goes through, how is it supported, how fast is it done? So many little variables there. And once again, it's something we've had to learn through trial and error of, fluting barrels for the last 30 years and finding out what will work and what won't work.
Right. And on that same topic, I guess, one of our other questions that we get quite a bit, especially at shows, is, well, do I need an eye fluted barrel? Do I need a snake fluted barrel? Straight fluted barrel? What kind of applications, or how do you differentiate what's right for you on that front?
Obviously there's a very cosmetic component to the different style of fluting that we do.
Yeah, it's style.
But the main thing that I tell people is with our eye fluting, we are able to remove about 12 ounces. The snake fluting is about 8, and the straight fluting is about 4 to 5 ounces.
So you're kind of back to that weight component.
So you're back to a weight component. And then additionally, if you look at it, there's a surface area component to that of how fast it'll cool.
Sure, yep.
The eye fluting, if you look at it, has the most surface area of any of our barrels. So, and when we talk about this, you are definitely splitting hairs.
Right, yep.
So it's hard to really quantify, but in a perfect world, that would be the case, that the eye fluted barrel removes the most weight, has the most surface area, and will cool the fastest.
So that's the most straightforward way to look at it.
Yes.
And switching subjects, you mentioned the 17 HMR earlier. One of the other big questions we get is, obviously we discontinued our 17 WSM. And we've touched on it a couple times and in a couple different places, but I think this would be a really good time to maybe go into, what happened with the 17 WSM caliber.
Do we have to?
I know. It was one of those things, right?
Long story short, we have discontinued all of our offerings in the 17 WSM. And it was one of the toughest things that we've done. We've had products that we've created, discontinued, and different things with, but never one that we had the amount of time and energy.
I was going to say, this wasn't for lack of trying for over a year.
Overall financial resources put into of trying to get the 17 WSM up to the standard that we hold ourselves to.
Right.
So the frustrating part about it was we've built we built rifles for customers that had 2,500, 3,000, 3,500 rounds through it. Never one failure to extract, failure to fire. They absolutely loved it because the round itself is phenomenal.
Yep.
And I still am a big fan of the round. What we found is there seemed to be such an inconsistency in the ammo from one lot to another.
Right.
that we could take an identical rifle, shoot it with one lot of ammo, it would shoot lights out, 0 issues. Take that same rifle, different lot of ammunition, same manufacturer, and not be able to get through a magazine of it.
Right, without issues.
Correct. So we get asked all the time, will it ever come back?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the next go-to question.
Yes. And I'm never one to say never. I would like to see, hopefully, the ammo, like anything that's new, will continue to improve.
Yep.
And they will learn and develop, better manufacturing practices with it. Mm-hmm. And my goal is if the ammo can continue, because it has gotten better since its introduction, no doubt about that. So if it can continue to improve, that opens up the possibility of us bringing it back, because we've done all the hard work. We have the design, we have the technology. Are there a couple things we may change if we ever bring it back? Probably. Right.
We'll be redesigning and probably reevaluating a couple things, right?
Yes. And it's, like you said earlier, it's got constant learning, research and development, and constantly trying to improve.
Yep.
So unfortunately right now we are not producing anything in that caliber, and we are redirecting our efforts to a couple different new projects that we will be releasing at the 2022 SHOT Show.
Yeah, that's going to be really exciting. If anyone has a 17 WSM of ours that they've had, or maybe they recently acquired, and obviously we still stand behind that. Do you want to touch on that too? If they already have a 17 WSM and maybe they're a little nervous, or maybe they've experienced a couple issues and they're trying to figure out what the answer is.
The first thing I would do is recommend for them to contact us, even more so if they've had it for any length of time. Mm-hmm. Because from the earlier ones that we manufactured, we made a lot of updates in the way the extraction worked, in the way the firing pin hit, basically throughout the rifle. So it's very possible if they do have one of the earlier ones, we have some minor updates that we can make.
Sure.
That will improve the functioning of what they have. And it's tough to say it'll completely eliminate it, because we're back to that ammunition issue. And I know there's been a couple other companies, I'm not going to name them by name, that I've seen videos that they've done asking if they were going to produce a bolt action 17 WSM. Mm-hmm. And they kind of found the same thing with the inconsistency in the ammo on why they were not going to do that, which in our mind sort of validated, even though we were building a semi-auto, if, high-end bolt action rifle companies weren't going to produce it because of the inconsistency, it kind of validated what we were thinking.
Right, because that was definitely a tough call on your part, as far as hitting the brakes on that, and for lack of a term, kind of cutting our losses, at least for the time being. That was a really tough decision. It was a tough decision, but it finally came down to, are we excited about putting that product out there towards the end? Yeah, does it live up to your expectations, our expectations as a company, your expectations? Yeah, is it meeting those things? Correct. Because for a lot of people, that may have been a first introduction into our product line. Yeah. And if they got it and had nothing but issues or weren't entirely satisfied with it, yes, we may have made that particular sale, but down the road, that is going to cost us in not only other sales, but just word of mouth of, well, I bought one of those and it just didn't quite work right. Right. Yep. And it's hard for us to put those out there knowing that even though the rifle may be built identical to one that a guy's not having an issue with, but when it's something out of our control in regards to performance, it's very tough to continue to put that out there. Yeah, I would completely agree with that. And, like you said, it was not easy because financially, we have a lot of product here that is just sitting on the shelf. Yeah. That we have a hard time throwing stuff away, so it'll still sit here. Yeah. But it is what it is at this point with that. Yeah. That was definitely a tough one. I know that was an email that was tough to write, and it's, every week in customer service, they typically do answer that question. Either someone already has a 17 WSM and want to check if it's supported yet, or they were looking to order or have a custom rifle built in 17 WSM. So correct, because the other part of that is we have guys who they've been on a hunt with their buddy that has one,
and they have a lot of ammunition that runs 100%.
Yep.
And they get back and they want one.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like, my buddy had one this weekend.
And it's tough to explain we discontinued it, and they're like, well, we just shot 1,500 rounds without a malfunction all weekend long. I need one.
Yeah, those are always tough conversations to have. So I guess on that front, is there anything else you wanted to cover? We kind of hit on our barrels, our parts, and then, our 17 WSM. Is there anything else you'd want to cover today?
I think that basically covers it. And, once again, if anybody has questions, whether it is tech related, it might be a question if they want to ask about the company or just want our opinion on something firearms related, hit us up and, we would love to talk about it. And if you enjoy the tech episode, let us know. We don't want to turn this into a technical podcast.
Right.
But at the same point, if we can be of service to our customers by answering something in this format versus trying to put it in an email.
Yeah, I completely agree.
We are all about doing that.
Yeah, I think it's fun to take kind of a few questions and just really focus on those few. I mean, you and I could talk different questions we see probably for another 30, 40 minutes. But I think, kind of doing them this way, 2, 3, 4 at a time, I think is probably the best way to go. So yeah, if you have any questions, make sure to drop us an email at podcast@volquartsen.com. I usually have my eye out on social media as well. If I see a lot of questions or a lot of the same questions, I'll jot them down. But yeah, like Scott said, if you enjoyed more of the tech episode, let us know that as well, and we'll continue to sprinkle these in.
That sounds good. And as always, thank you for listening, and we will be back next week with another great guest. Thank you.